At the 40th Phyllis Schlafly Eagle Council, we sat down with Mark Ludwig, who founded the Americans for Equal Shared Parenting group. Mark Ludwig, excellent to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So your organization is Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. And this is, I had never heard of this concept, until we met. Tell me a little bit about what you do and how this all came about.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's an issue that unless you've been personally affected, most people have no idea. I was in that same boat until I became affected. The goal is to make sure that children have equal access to both parents after divorce.
Okay.
Obviously, we hope that divorce never happens. The reality is that it's going to happen in 50% of the situations. And the bad thing is it's the children that are paying the price.
Okay.
So we started working on what we call rebuttable presumption laws across the country that states that when two parents walk into a courtroom, the presumption should be that that child should have equal access to both parents.
Okay.
The same way they had before the divorce. It's rebuttable though, because you don't want to rubber stamp, every case. So that judges will still have judicial discretion to based on some parameters to decide, is that the best situation for the child? But you don't know that until you get into a courtroom.
So wait, what is the default now?
Right, good question. Right now, in about 83% of the cases nationwide, one parent is going to become the superior custodial parent. One is the inferior non-custodial parent that usually gets every other weekends and sometimes Wednesday night visits.
Okay.
And I use the term visit because that's what it becomes. It's not really parenting. In my own situation, I don't like to talk a lot of details about my own situation because once again, it's not about the other parent, it's about the system. But when you only see your child on weekends, you become what's known as the Disneyland dad, where it's fun to be with dad, and I appreciate that. I love the fun times. The challenge is, from a parenting situation, my role as a father is to make sure I'm raising a child with some discipline. And when he doesn't see the routine, he needs to see me get his breakfast ready in the morning. He needs to see me getting him ready for school, doing homework with him at night. He needs to see dad has work to do at night. And if a child only sees the fun times on weekends, that's not a healthy environment for the child. And when you look at, anywhere from 70 to 94% of just about every societal problem that you see, whether it's, 26 of the last 28 school shooters that came from fatherless homes, the teenage runaways, high school dropout rates, incarceration rates, drug use, 70 to 94% of every one of those is tied to growing up without a dad. And when you think about it, the reason is there's two traumas. Number one is mom and dad aren't together.
Okay.
And the younger a child is, they don't understand why. All they know is their life is split up and they're confused. Okay. Now they're relegated as a visitor to one of the parents, and they're really confused now because they love that parent just as much. With my son, I don't want full custody of my son because that's not healthy for him either. It takes two parents to make a child for a reason. Both of us, whether you like each other or not, it doesn't matter. Each adds a different value that the other can't add in that child's life. So they need both parents. And the challenge is that child gets confused when one parent kind of has to ask permission to vary the schedule. Or one parent's always, in that child's mind, they're thinking one parent's the real superior parent, the other isn't really the parent, because I just need to check with this parent to get permission.
So this is really interesting. I don't know if you happen to know the stats, but so how many children that are growing up in a single parent home are from a divorced couple as opposed to there never was a couple in the first place? Do you have a sense of?
I don't have the numbers on that. I need to look. I know we've got them. I just don't have them off the top of my head. I never even thought to think about it until just now. But is it which one is the larger number? Like I just don't have a sense of this. It basically also depends on the socioeconomic group. In the lower economic groups, there's a lot more unmarried than married. But that number obviously has been growing to a large degree. It's been growing, and a lot of it stemmed from, I'm going to be talking today about the Title 4D federal incentives that started in the 70s, that Phyllis Schlafly was one of the first ones saying that women are going to end up marrying the government because it becomes more financially beneficial to them to do that. And so that number has consistently risen since the 70s.
Right. Okay. No, I'm gonna have to go or maybe we can do some stat hunting after this interview. I'm very, very curious to learn about that, because I've come to believe also that the lack of fathers seems to kind of intersect with all sorts of social problems.
Oh, it definitely. I mean, every time I see a school shooting, the first thing I think of is I can almost guarantee you that child grew up without their father. Almost, and it's amazing how the mainstream media wants us to believe it's a gun problem. Well, in every single one of these situations, aside from one or two, the child grew up without a father. You know, imagine how confused that child is growing up without a male role model. And you know, if you look at the gangs, who is their role model? Their role model are the gang members instead of their own fathers.
So, okay, equal shared parenting. I can imagine probably fairly commonly scenarios where both parents don't actually want that. You know, there's one parent that wants it, and these other parents may be, you know, less committed. How is that dealt with?
That's why we go for what we call a rebuttable presumption. The presumption is that in an ideal scenario, it's, you know, that both are DNA, so they both get equal custody.
Well,
however,
and also responsibility.
Exactly.
It works both ways, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But it's rebuttable based on the fact that they may be unfit, unwilling, or unable. There may be a situation where one parent lives in California, one lives in Florida. It's going to be very hard to go back and forth on a regular. So there's different determining factors that judges can look at.
Right.
But until you know the facts, you can't automatically rubber stamp every other weekend every parent.
This is about changing the baseline, basically, from one
from the
parent
20-yard
being
line
the
to the 50-yard line.
Okay, I got it.
Because right now what happens is across the, and this is something traditionally this has been more of a conservative issue by and large across the country. But I'm getting a lot of support from liberals in inner cities who are saying, you know what, a lot of our fathers in the inner cities, they don't want to go to court because they know they can't afford an attorney. And if they show up in court, they know that the best they're going to get is every other weekend.
I see.
But they probably won't even get that in an inner city. They're going to get a child support amount that's imputed that they can't dispute to be able to show what the real amount should be. So their attitude is they just run. And they don't. And the fathers are being chased out.
Now, is it typically the case that fathers would want to fight for equal access?
Yeah, the media and especially a lot of all the TV shows talk about the typical, you know, deadbeat dad, and they portray that image. But I'm telling you, if you walked into a family courtroom and just sat there all day long, you would be amazed at story after story after story. You know, since my story started going viral, I get contacted, I would say at least 50 to 60 people a week now are contacting me, telling me a story that's almost carbon copy to my story. So it's like I said, it's prevalent all across the country where people are, they say right now there's 19 million children that are not living with their biological dad in any given night. 10 million of those kids have not seen their biological father in 1 year or longer. And they estimate half of those kids that haven't seen their dad in a year longer, the dads are actively seeking custody.
Fascinating. You know, this goes counter to a lot of kind of unconscious assumptions that I guess I had that I hadn't really thought about.
And I was the same way. If someone had told me a father was getting every other weekend, before I went through my situation, I would have thought it was normal and I wouldn't have seen the problem. And then when it happens to you, I give the analogy, it's like when you buy a new car and you're driving to work that next day and you see 10 cars that are the same make and model as yours.
Yeah.
And you're like, where did they come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just your radar all of a sudden, and all of a sudden, once it happened to me, I started hearing story after story after story, and everybody I talk to says the same thing. They're like, oh yeah, it's very common, but until it happens to you, you're not aware of it. But when it happened to me, that was when I started realizing, I started studying those numbers and realizing, and then I started putting myself in my child's shoes and looking from his perspective, what is it like to go all week long without seeing your dad? You know, to not be there when the other kids are playing ball with their dad in the front yard after school and he doesn't get to. When the other kids, their dad's teaching them how to ride a bike and he doesn't get to. And missing out on all those normal activities that I had when I was growing up with my dad. That my child isn't, you know, my child doesn't ever get, aside from Friday, he never gets to tell me what it's like to do, what school was like during the day. And those are bonding opportunities that you
Sure.
need with your child.
Sure. So your organization mainly focuses on updating or creating legislation or lobbying for legislation? Or
Yeah, there's two things we focus on. It's Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. At the state level, we focus on these 50-50 rebuttable presumption laws, just saying that before two parents walk into a courtroom, the assumption is the child is going to have equal access to both parents. And then at the federal level, we're working at, the real problem is because of a funding mechanism at the federal level.
Okay.
And Phyllis Schlafly was the first one who talked about this. But states are paid incentives for a social program that was started with great intent. It's Title 40 of the Social Security Act.
Yeah.
And back in the 70s, when I was growing up, my dad was a chemical engineer, my mom was a homemaker. So if 12 years into the marriage, they would have gotten a divorce. If my dad wasn't paying child support, there's no way my mom could have gotten a job competing with kids coming out of college and high school and more skills.
Understood.
So she would have needed that safety net.
Right.
And so as a result, those women a lot of times were going on welfare, and a program was designed that said, if this woman is going on welfare, we're going to design a program to go after the true deadbeat dad, if you will, who's not paying child support. That I don't have as much as a problem with. The problem became in the 80s and 90s when that program stopped being a means-tested program that was for people who were going to end up on welfare, and every middle class and upper class child support order got thrown into the Title 40 program.
Oh, okay.
And as a result, states started realizing, hey, you know what? It's not worth it to track down the deadbeat dad. I don't like that term, but it's just the general public's aware of it. So if somebody's not paying child support, the challenge is the type of person who's not paying any child support, chances are has changed jobs 3 times, they've changed homes 3 times. Many times their child support order is so low. One of the reasons they're not paying is they don't have the money. They have a hard time keeping a job.
Right.
So if I'm a child enforcement worker, I can either spend a week tracking one of these people down, or here's an order over here for an average middle class person. Their order is, I don't know, $700, $800, $900 a month. Hey, if they go after that person, they get a lot more credits towards this federal incentive money that they get paid on.
Oh, I see.
So the sad thing is they have stopped chasing these people at all. So the people the program was designed to go after, nobody's even tracking them at all. Instead, they're tracing federal dollars because the more money a state collects, the more incentive money they're going to get from the federal government. And so they're chasing the dollars, if you will. And the easiest way to chase the dollars is get a split order. Because if you have true 50-50, both parents have a bedroom, both parents have clothes, both have food expenses. So
and there isn't money exchanging.
Yeah, unless there's a big disparity in income. Now there may be a disparity in income, but barring that, most cases are going to be pretty close. But if you get an every other weekend split, one's going to have to pay a pretty hefty child support amount. And that's why in 83% of the cases across the country, you find one's going to become the custodial, one's the non-custodial.
Well, so Mark Ludwig, excellent to have you.
All right, thanks so much. I appreciate it.